27th regular business meeting of Waynesboro City Council. I would like to welcome everyone this evening. For those in attendance, if you wish to speak during citizen comment period, please sign up on the sheet in the back of chambers. And I also like to wish Mr. Allen a speedy recovery. He could not be here tonight. And Mr. Short, could you lead us in the pledge?
My pleasure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Okay, item 3 is adoption of the meeting agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Do I have a second?
No second.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Item 4 is matters from mayor. I have a few items to go over tonight. On Wednesday, I had the honor to travel with RISE scholars to the state capitol, where John Avoli introduced them in the House chambers to his colleagues and the speaker. They were greeted by many delegates, and they spent some time with our Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears. And last night, I attended the One Night Cannot Hold Our History performed by RISE scholars at the Waynesboro High School in recognition of Black History Month. I was helping in the back with the children get ready for each set, and while I did not see the performance from the audience, I saw firsthand the hard work and dedication that went into the program. And let me just say, I was exhilarated and exhausted at the same time. Next. We as members of council must hold ourselves to a heightened standard. Mr. Wood's recent comments do not reflect the city or city council, nor do his comments reflect the policy of the city and council to respect and be respectful of everyone, and to treat everyone with compassion and dignity. Such language is unacceptable in any context and has no place in our city. As a representative of Waynesboro, he should not be making remarks that are insulting and demeaning. I cannot condone Mr. Wood's comments in the podcast. Although he was speaking as a private citizen, his comments have a negative impact on the city, its residents, and council. Council has no legal authority to remove Mr. Wood from office or remove his title. I have, however, heard from many citizens and have discussed amongst council who believe it would be in the city's best interest if Mr. Wood would relinquish his vice mayor title. Next, matters from council members.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a statement. As an African American, I'm not immune to derogatory slurs used to describe people of color. Even serving in the armed forces for 28 years, I experienced this type of behavior. So I want to emphatically state that I deplore any such behavior to any group, and I am shocked, angry, and saddened that my colleague decided to use such a disparaging term against the LGBTQ community. It is difficult that we must address this tonight rather than doing what we were elected to do. It is difficult that this will only create yet another opportunity to divide us rather than to unite us. It is difficult that Waynesboro has now made national headlines in a negative way. It is difficult, but the right thing to do, that I ask my colleague to voluntarily relinquish the title of vice mayor. We all make mistakes, and forgiveness should be the order of the day. But Mr. Wood's comments, while not representative of Waynesboro or this council, have clearly shown that the title of vice mayor should not be associated with his name. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll just offer a couple of observations. First, to piggyback on your remarks, Madam Mayor, is that I thought I would just, for the folks in attendance and those might be watching at home, I've spoken to our legal counsel and just thought I would spend a little time talking about what we can do and what we cannot do. Our code, I know the news leader had made some observations of language in the Waynesboro Code relative to the punishment of council members for misconduct. So again, thought I'd spend a little time talking about what we can and cannot do. From the context of punishing a council member, yes, that's in our code. It's actually in our charter. However, the definition of misconduct has, and a code of conduct for council members has not been a material element that existed in the city since 1964, when that code was actually written into our code, when that reference was written into our code. So that said, no member of council can either remove Mr. Wood or strike him of his title of vice mayor pursuant to our code and our charter. Only the voters and courts may do that under a petition process. Next is, again, as I mentioned, stripping a mayor or vice mayor of their title is rooted in the inability for our ability to act on that is limited because of the fact that since the dawn of the city of Waynesboro, our city has not found the need to establish a code of standard for our elected body. So with that, I thought I'd offer then next my statement, because while I can't do that, we do have this amazing country and our ability to speak our mind and make an issue our own public statements, and that's what I intend to do now. I too, like my colleagues, am embarrassed and disappointed in Mr. Wood's now pattern of ugly and homophobic rhetoric. Let me read an excerpt from one of his many attempts in written press at a written apology. My priority is the city of Waynesboro, and I would never intentionally want to have a negative impact on our city, our council, or our citizens. As I see it, those priorities now rest with an exhibition and pattern of divisive and hurtful rhetoric that now undermine our city's competitiveness for both federal and state grant opportunities, quite possibly for the duration of Mr. Wood's term. To date, you have not even acknowledged that you did anything wrong. Rather, you have blamed others for misconstruing your words. Examples of this deflection can now be seen in the print of our local, regional papers, our state media, and now national publications. If anyone were to open up a browser and search a simple search for the city of Waynesboro and our vice mayor, those are going to be the first responses that you see on a Google search. So again, reflecting on that statement made to various media outlets, tonight I am also asking you, Mr. Wood, to prioritize our city, prioritize this council, and all of its citizens. And I ask that you do the right thing to support the future economic prosperity of our city and resign from the Waynesboro City Council. In terms of next steps, in conclusion, because as I've stated, there's limited options for the balance of the elected body and my colleagues on council. So with that, I've spoken with my colleagues on council, and I believe in unanimously support for that. And with Mr. Allen as well, is that I've asked our city manager to work with our city attorney to develop a Waynesboro City Council Code of Conduct for review and action by this body in the next 60 days, so that we can establish some basic decorum, both in and out. I know for folks that have ever run for public office, either run successfully or unsuccessfully, and then ultimately have served. I remember in 2015, when I started knocking on doors, I was a candidate throughout that duration. And what that means is that there is no off the clock and on the clock. It's always the clock. You're always responding. You're always advocating for your vision and your hope for the better community. The same can be said when you become an elected official as well. I'm sure you'll hear narratives of First Amendment and is just completely accurate. But, outside private citizen and the like, when you knock on the first door, that's just not a view that I share. With that, that concludes my statement, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. Moving on. Item 6 is consideration of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes 4-0. Item 7 is to receive a presentation from Adam Campbell, VDOT District Planner on West Main Street improvements and VDOT-funded Broad Street corridor improvements. Mr. Ham.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Mayor. Just a brief word of introduction before Mr. Campbell's presentation. The staff presented conceptual plans for these two projects prior to submitting the projects for state funding, so they may be familiar to you and they may be familiar to the public who were either attended that meeting or viewed the presentation online. The projects have now been funded and are in the initial design phase. Primary goals for the project are to improve traffic and pedestrian safety, and consideration will be provided to sidewalks in certain segments or portions of each project. Those areas, again, are the West Main Street corridor and the Broad Street corridor, both of which have probably some number of, or have been identified as having the opportunity to improve both pedestrian and vehicular traffic flow and safety. Each project will have some element of aesthetic improvement as well. I'd like to introduce Mr. Campbell. He's the VDOT District Planner, and thank him for his presentation tonight, but also extend our thanks to he and his colleagues for their ongoing support and partnership on this and a number of other projects that are important to our community. We certainly couldn't accomplish what we do without the partnership and technical support from VDOT. So thank you, Adam, and please take that message back to your colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Hamp. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having me here tonight. As Mr. Hamp said, I just wanted to give a quick overview of two funded projects that the city applied for in the 2020 VDOT grant cycle for funding and received funding. I know that there's some, as Mr. Hamp stated, these projects are just getting underway in the preliminary engineering design phase. So we wanted to come out tonight and present it to you all just because there's some new members of council since the city decided to apply for these, just to share with you where we're at with the project, the main components of the project, and just give you an opportunity to discuss among yourselves and provide any potential feedback to staff to relay back to VDOT before we get too far in the design process. So I'll be talking about both two sections of 250 tonight. The first one is West Main Street from the western city limits to Hopeman Parkway, and then Broad Street from its intersection with Main Street on the west side of downtown, and then again intersection with Main Street on the east side of downtown. So we'll start off with the section of West Main Street from the western city limits through Ludwig Boulevard to Hopeman Parkway. So this section of corridor was actually a VDOT and city study back from 2019 as part of the VDOT STARS program, which looks at corridors which have safety and congestion needs based on 5 years of data. And then we work with our localities to see if they are interested in doing a study, evaluate the corridor from a safety operations standpoint, look into the future, and then come up with solutions that we feel will be competitive for transportation funding. As part of that process, we had an online public survey to present the needs of the corridor and the recommendations that were developed as part of that study process. We provided a presentation to City Council on those recommendations in June 2020. Like I said, the city submitted application for funding for that project in 2020, receiving $12.6 million through VDOT Smart Scale program. Design is underway. Right now, the project schedule is to start construction in January 26 with about a year construction cycle ending before the end of 2026. So as part of the study, we looked at, it was a joint study with Waynesboro and Augusta County. We looked at Goose Creek all the way into Hopeman Parkway. Both the county and the city made applications. The city application was funded. So we're looking at, out here we have a 5-lane typical section, so 2 travel lanes in each direction on Main Street with a 2-way center left turn lane. Average traffic on that roadway is 17,000 to 18,000 vehicles per day. Relatively low heavy vehicle percentage on the corridor. There are 4 signalized intersections along the corridor. So we see a lot of these type of 5-lane typical sections have safety issues. Basically because of any entrance, any commercial entrance or any intersection, vehicles have full access. They can make a turning movement at any location. Each one of those access points provides 32 potential conflict points where crashes can occur. So that was really what set the stage for the safety needs of the corridor. I also note that the pedestrian accommodations on this section of Main Street are very spotty. There's only a few sections of sidewalks here and there between Ludewitt and Hopeman Parkway. So again, I just talked about the number of access points along the corridor are not desirable from an access management standpoint. 83% of the crashes involved angle or rear end crash collisions, which you see a lot when you have substandard intersection and commercial entrance spacing along a corridor. For the 5 years of crashes that we looked at during the study, we averaged more than 50 crashes per year. We were over 200 crashes for the 5-year period. There were multiple pedestrian and fatal crashes during that time period. That's really what generated the need for the study. So how do you fix that? Well, pretty much a straightforward solution for this type of 5-lane facility is the introduction of a center median. This is classified as a minor arterial, which means you need to give a proper balance between mobility, so vehicle throughput, and access. So yes, while you do, by introducing the median, you are starting to limit some full access. We felt like there were plenty of locations along the corridor with the existing signals and where we could have unsignalized full access points where we could introduce that median but still maintain a very adequate level of access to the various businesses along the corridor. So this was the project recommendation that was advanced for funding and has received funding. Since this did have a robust operational analysis with the study, there will be some limited additional operational analysis with current traffic data and new forecast as part of the project. But it'll mainly could adjust a few access points, but mostly this is set as it is as funded with the Smart Scale funding. So we're starting from the west at the western city limits. You can see just the introduction of the center median there as you progress through Ludewitt, keeping a full access point at Community Boulevard, maintaining full access at both the signals at Ludewitt and the shopping center where the Big Lots is just to the east. You'll also notice that here's where we start picking up a sidewalk. The sidewalk starts on the north side of Main Street before crossing over to the south side at Ludewitt Boulevard. All of the signalized intersections will get full pedestrian treatments with crosswalks and pedestrian signal heads to accommodate those users of the corridor. So this is one example of an area where we may take another look at with design. You see at Bookerdale and Stonewall Drive. So they're very closely spaced intersections. We had to make a decision of where it made the most sense to provide a partial access. So in this design, Bookerdale got the westbound left into Bookerdale. That will be reevaluated with the design of the study. Still keeping full access at Barksdale, full access at Summercrest Avenue. And then as we keep going, there's the signal at Vedette at the Sheets. And then keeping the signal at Hopeman Parkway. On your eastbound approach towards downtown on Main Street, there was a recommendation to kind of do a lane shift. Right now, you have the 2 through lanes. One becomes the right turn into the garden center. We're going to do a lane shift so that that inside second lane becomes the left turn lane onto Hopeman Parkway. That will really help with volume balancing as you approach that intersection, just so more people utilize that second through lane. So again, yeah, and continuing the sidewalk all the way to where it ends at Hopeman Parkway. So that is the extent of that one. I'm happy to take any questions before I move on to Broad Street if you have any.
Does anyone have any questions?
I forgot. I just wanted to do a quick high level of, so this was one of the first studies we did. This was right at the onset of COVID when we started lockdown. It just happened that VDOT got a very great public outreach tool on the onset of COVID with what's called a MetroQuest online survey. So this was one of the first studies we utilized that tool, and we're able to do an online survey to present the needs and recommendations of the corridor. We got 942 responses for that survey, with generally very favorable responses, with both agreeing with the needs and the recommendations. Here you can see some of the alternatives we provided. The existing conditions of the 5-lane section out there had the lowest rating at 2.5 out of 5 rating. You can see what we ultimately went with was scored an average of 3.35 out of 5. We consider anything over 3 to be publicly accepted. Once you start getting up to 3.5, it's very well received. Again, we did typical sections of what it could look like out there. The 4-lane divided, that offers some potential for median landscaping, just to beautify improve the aesthetics of the corridor as well. Okay, so now we're on to Broad Street. Very similar project, another 5-lane section where there's opportunities to look at median and multimodal improvements to improve safety for all users of the corridor. So this one was not a VDOT study. This was a city-initiated improvement concept. It's been in the city comprehensive plan for a while. The city submitted it for smart scale, although it was ultimately funded with a different funding source. So there's some rules associated with smart scale funding that this does not apply to. The project budget was $7.2 million for Broad Street. Right now, $4.5 million of that project is funded. There is a $2.7 million balance. The city will have to work with VDOT in the future to come up with another grant opportunity to fill in that shortfall right now. But the plan is to go ahead and design the full corridor as submitted with the design phase, knowing that the city will apply for that funding in the future. Same construction schedule currently, with starting in January 26, ending in December 26. So this one, I kind of just wanted to show an overview of some of the tools that VDOT uses from a safety standpoint to come up with where the corridors where these improvements are needed. So this is a picture of just our potential for safety improvement mapping. This looks at the number of actual crashes happening on a corridor and at an intersection compared to the anticipated number of crashes based on roadway characteristics, roadway volumes. So the higher the discrepancy between the actual crashes and what should be happening based on characteristics, the higher the potential for safety improvement. So you'll see for this section of Broad Street, all the segments highlighted in blue and the intersections highlighted in red, those are ones where you're experiencing more crashes than anticipated. Just to give you an example from the most current set of crash data we have for Broad Street, in the 5-year period, there's been a total of 139 total crashes, with 55 of those involving injuries. So this is the concept that was submitted, that received funding for. So basically, there's already a section of divided Broad Street as you approach the Main and Rosser intersection. The plan is to continue that median along the corridor. This section of Broad Street has a much more complete pedestrian network already, but there's certainly opportunities for improvement. The project is going to fill in the existing sidewalk gaps that are out there, replace some sections of deteriorated sidewalk, and then upgrade all of the pedestrian crossing and signal heads at the existing signalized intersections along the corridor. Now, since this one does not have a VDOT study, the design phase for this project has a much more in-depth analysis, operational analysis associated with it, so we can verify where we need turn lanes and the length of those turn lanes based on anticipated storage needs for those movements. But fairly straightforward, just moving along, again, providing certain areas of access points, and then just creating a median where landscaping, again, can add to the aesthetic value of the corridor. That's important truly here, as it's one of the city's main downtown corridors. Filling in just some small sections of sidewalk. This section, as you approach the crossing at the South River, already has a pretty good sidewalk network. And then just continuing in and making the better connection to sidewalk connection at the east side intersection with Main Street. So that's all I have, unless you all have any comments on the Broad Street section.
Hey, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Campbell? No? Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. This is just for presentation purposes only, and no action is required this evening. Item 8 is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating $497,000 of assigned fund balance to the school board for school renovations, and an ordinance appropriating $66,954 of restricted fund balance to the general fund for improvements to the fire department building. Mr. McCormick.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. So in the spring of 2020, during the budget process for 2021, we were projecting a number of revenue shortfalls based on the COVID-19 pandemic, and as part of those shortfalls to help.
I don't think that's legal.
Sir, we are,
What he's doing isn't legal.
there will be respect and decorum in this chamber.
Read law.
Continue, Mr. McCormick.
Yes, ma'am. As part of those shortfalls to help balance the budget, we worked with the schools and basically level funded them from the 2020 budget in 2021. Those shortfalls never ended up really coming to fruition, so as part of the 2021 audit process, we took that $497,000 and put it in an assigned fund balance for the schools to be used at a later date if council desired to. The schools have requested that that money be appropriated, and that is appropriation A, and then appropriation B is leftover restricted funds from the fire board that weren't spent during the prior year that they're requesting be appropriated for equipment and apparatuses.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there any discussion? Oh, wait, let's see. Oh, is there a motion to introduce the appropriation ordinance 8A, $497,000 of assigned fund balance to the school board for renovations, and 8B, $66,954 of restricted fund balance for the fire department to the general fund? Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Short, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you, and any discussion? Okay, this ordinance will carry over to the March 13th meeting. Item 9 is to consider adopting various appropriation ordinances totaling $367,926. Mr. McCormick.
Thank you again, Madam Vice Mayor. The majority of these ordinances are $303,908 for various grants to the school funds that don't require any contribution from the general fund. There's $34,860 of contributions from Stanton and Augusta to put in a CAD-to-CAD software that they are paying us back for, and then about $24,000 of additional state library aid funds that weren't anticipated during the previous year, and then a couple of miscellaneous donations and sponsorship revenues.
Okay.
These items can be introduced, seconded, and adopted this evening.
Okay. Do you have any questions? No? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt the appropriation ordinances 9A through 9F totaling $367,926?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Is there a second?
A second?
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries 4-0. Item 10 is to consider introducing an ordinance amending the City Code, Chapter 82, as it pertains to parking fines, and set a public hearing for March 13th. Mr. Hamp?
Yes, ma'am, Mayor Williams. You may recall that the council directed staff to do some research regarding our parking fines, and it had been some time since the city had updated those fines. And Assistant City Manager for Public Safety, Mike Wilhelm, conducted some research, and essentially what we discovered was that Waynesboro's fines ran about half to 60% less than what we found in our survey of neighboring localities and similar-sized localities in the Commonwealth. That was not an exhaustive study, but a sampling of, again, neighboring localities and then other localities in the Commonwealth. This evening, you have been presented with an ordinance that updates our fines. We recommend increasing most of the parking fines from $10 per offense to $20 per offense. And again, I think the survey revealed that our neighbors have anywhere from $20 to $30 to $50 per offense. So again, I think the objective was to update the fine schedule, so to introduce a greater deterrent, and I think we've accomplished that. This evening, you'll introduce the ordinance and set a public hearing for our next regular business meeting, I think occurs on March 13th, at which time we'll have a public hearing and the council will consider a final vote at that time. We're happy to respond to any questions that you may have this evening.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance and hold a public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And this item will carry over to the March 13th meeting. Item 11 is to consider appointing Shanda McGuffin to the Economic Development Authority for the unexpired 4-year term ending August 31st, 2023.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wood. And do I have a second?
Second.
And is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes 4-0. Item 12 is communication, correspondence, and calendar. Mr. Hamp?
I don't have anything this evening, ma'am.
All right. That brings us to item 13, which is citizen comment period. I would like to remind speakers, when you come up to the mic, I need you to state your name and your address for our record. You'll have 4 minutes to address council. The light system, right here, will serve as the timer. Once it turns yellow, you'll have 30 seconds remaining. The red light indicates your time is up. We ask that you direct your comments to me, or council as a whole, and we ask that you be respectful of those that are speaking. We are here to listen and will not respond to any questions during the comment period. Okay, Mr. Ham.
Yes, ma'am. Andrea Jackson.
I got my own little comment because
Okay. Okay. I need some assistance. There will be order in this chamber. If I have to speak again, you will be removed.
I got my blood pressure up. All right, so I got my own. I'm gonna start because I tend to go a little bit up to the time. My name's Andrea Jackson. I'm in Ward A, and I want to speak on several different things and maybe kind of set the tone of the comments that we're going to hear tonight. First, I want to say that I'm disappointed in I try to keep up what's going on, and I try to be knowledgeable, and I did make the last time we had a comment for the city council to be mindful of the direction of we want the city to go in when you went into this retreat. And I read the news article today about what was y'all's priorities, and quite frankly, I'm disappointed. I do know that whatever that industrial park y'all got going on, I understand that. But the second, and it's going to upset some of the people here, but it's sorry, the more police officers. Now, I understand how people need a living wage, but all the employees of the city need to be paid more. This is a huge governance issue, just not one department. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that these officers don't deserve it, or that, let's say, it hasn't been their slots being filled. But what we gonna do here is, stop trying to the symptoms. You know what I mean? Statistically, hiring more cops is not gonna stop the crime. Investing in the community is. So, if that's what we're going to do, we want to reduce crime, drug use, all of that, we need to start investing in the community, investing in the youth, investing in, reducing drugs. And that's, I mean, whatever. So I know this is just getting started with the budget system, but we need to be mindful of like what's really in the best interest of the city. Not y'all's priorities, Waynesboro's priorities. And housing is one of them. And we're going to hear a lot about that, so I'm going to let them say that. We said that before. Now, on this other issue, and I got a lot to say, and everybody, I know a lot of people going to say a lot of stuff, but here we go. This is a lot on all of us. Because it's easy to be mad at Jim Wood, right? But Jim Wood is going to be the Jim Wood. Now, if you seen his website, you know he was going to act a fool. Point blank, period. You knew that. And so it took him a month. And that's on us as a community who didn't come out to vote, who didn't come out to help with other campaigns, who didn't step up to run against him. Now, we all here now because it's, our emotions, we want to complain. But we need to be filling this chamber every second Monday and fourth Monday. This is democracy, letting the people voice what they have to say. But then I got something also. Yeah, y'all should ask him to relinquish the vice mayor and also his things. But it's a lot more that needs to be done, training, whatever. But the simple fact that you did not even
Thank you so much for your time.
apology.
Thank you.
Savannah Firstner.
My name's Savannah Firstner, and I live on Maple Avenue. It's no secret that there is a housing crisis happening here in the state of Virginia. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, across Virginia, there is a shortage of rental homes, both affordable and available to extremely low-income households. So how is this statewide crisis reflected in our city of Waynesboro? Housing costs are rising exponentially and disproportionately to our community members' wages. Residents are being pushed out of the city for two primary reasons. First, rising house costs and the fact that Waynesboro is increasingly becoming a so-called bedroom community for Charlottesville. And second, a lack of affordable housing units available for rent. Based on 2020 data, jobs in Waynesboro have increased approximately 8%, and housing units have only increased approximately 5% since 2010. The number of jobs are growing faster than the supply of housing. Furthermore, as you'll hear from the next several speakers with Virginia Organizing, the affordable housing that does exist already is both unsafe and inhospitable. In Waynesboro, the median household income for renters is $27,078. The U.S. Census Bureau then puts the median gross cost of rent in Waynesboro at $860 per month, not including cost of utilities. That means that renters with a median household income of approximately $27,000 are spending nearly 40% of their annual income on rent alone. Add that to the ballooning cost of utilities, food, healthcare, and gas, and it's very easy to see why so many folks in our city end up living paycheck to paycheck and find themselves one emergency away from missing rent payments. Spending such a significant portion of income on housing is a defining characteristic of what is known as being cost-burdened. Between 2012 and 2018, 31.2% of all Waynesboro residents were considered cost-burdened. Furthermore, the 2021 Community Needs Assessment Report put together by CAPSAW illustrates that this problem is much worse in Waynesboro than Stanton or Augusta County. Cost-burdened folks, again, defined as folks who spend more than 30% of their income on housing, make up 36.2% of renters and 33.65% of homeowners. Compare that with 5.1% of renters and 11.9% of cost-burdened homeowners in both Stanton and Augusta County. That's a staggering and shameful difference between our city and the surrounding area. Based off of these numbers, it is more than obvious that folks in Waynesboro are struggling to keep up with rising housing costs. But we do have some affordable housing here in town, right? Unfortunately, what we have is not nearly enough. Housing Forward Virginia has tabulated the number of rental units needed at a specific affordability level to fully eliminate cost burden. For Waynesboro City, we would need approximately 1,205 more rental units in HUD housing to alleviate cost burdens. Again, it's no wonder then that so many Waynesboro community members are struggling and living in unsafe conditions. And that's a fact too. Many Waynesborians are unable to pay rent and struggling and thus face eviction. Our rate of eviction filing in Waynesboro is over 12%, which is also the highest in our region. Beyond all of these deeply upsetting statistics, there are also visible signs of the housing crisis in Waynesboro and the increasing number of homeless individuals that live in our city. Many of you are familiar with Waynesboro Area Refuge Ministry, aka WARM, which reported recently that they have been at capacity for this winter season. This fact is both obviously and directly linked to our extreme lack of affordable and safe housing. Having followed this issue for several years as a member of our Waynesboro chapter of Virginia Organizing, I'm aware that many of you council members have acknowledged the housing crisis as cause for concern. However, I think it's beyond time to put action to your words. If you truly care about affordable housing, you'll show us by supporting our campaign. Additionally, let's not put the entire burden of care on local nonprofits and social services. Yes, these organizations are amazing and very key to assisting the housing crisis, but it's not only up to them. It's also your responsibility as leaders of our city to prioritize this crisis by taking action. In conclusion, I don't know about you, but as a citizen of Waynesboro, I'm ashamed to know nearly all of the statistics that I've mentioned today. Waynesboro is a beautiful city with so much to love, and yet everything that I've spoken of reveals that our city remains both unwelcoming and inaccessible to an increasing number of folks.
Thank you so much.
Jackie Grant.
Hi, my name is JC Grant, and I live on Cross Keys Way. Our chapter has been working in the community since 2020, Virginia Organizing chapter that is. We've talked to hundreds of residents about what they want to see to change in Waynesboro, and that top answer being housing. For the last 2+ years, we've worked on housing issues and heard one of the biggest concerns being rental housing conditions and landlords not responding to maintenance requests. We saw tenants living with mold, broken appliances, broken HVAC systems, and other unsafe conditions. We read through the 2018 comprehensive plan and saw that this was an issue that was documented there, and a rental inspection program was proposed to address the issue. We met with city council members initially last spring about this issue and possible solution. We used what we learned from those meetings, and we went back to the community to meet more tenants, continue documenting the issue, inform tenants of their rights through community workshops, and gather petition signatures to show the community support and investment of this type of program. We also informed tenants of the existing process to report concerns about housing conditions, though the city's inspection form. However, this is not an easy thing to find on the city website, and many renters we've spoken with are scared to complete this form out of fear of retaliation by their landlord. We've knocked on thousands of doors and talked to hundreds of tenants about their experience as a renter in this city. We've talked to community service providers to hear their concerns and where they are seeing gaps in our housing infrastructure. We've researched the rental inspection programs in multiple cities across Virginia, including Winchester, Hopewell, and Petersburg, for example. We talked to the city staff in charge of those programs in other cities and learned best practices, how to fund the program, and gathered advice. We've met with the city staff to discuss their process and share our research on the local housing conditions issue, as well as our research on rental inspection programs. We've brought tenants to the city council meetings before and to local reporters to share their stories, as we also have tonight, though many are scared to speak out about their conditions because they do not want to jeopardize their housing. I personally get to go home tonight and sleep not worrying about mold, as I assume many of you do as well. And I ask you to deeply listen to what people are about to say, and try and listen and engage in that conversation. And after this, DR is going to be coming up to share specifics about the rental inspection program. Last thing I'll ask you is to read my shirt, which says, "Together we can change." So please just remember that each of us have that responsibility to initiate change in our community. Thank you.
Deidre Becky.
Hello, I'm Deidre Becky with Virginia Organizing. I'm in Ward A. Since tenants and landlords aren't always experts on housing quality, the rental inspection program proposed by Virginia Organizing can identify issues earlier before they become more severe or pervasive. Per the Virginia Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, both landlords and tenants must promote safe, decent, habitable, and sanitary rental conditions. Inspections are done to ensure compliance with the Unified Building Maintenance Code. Upon passing, the unit is given a certificate of compliance and can be let. Certificates can also be revoked for violations. Rental inspections hold slumlords accountable while they support landlords who do right by their tenants, not to mention local land values. Virginia cities with these programs include Winchester, Hopewell, Petersburg, Virginia Beach, Lynchburg, Roanoke, and Newport News. The cost of inspections or re-inspections are borne by the landlord and set by the locality, usually $50. If it's a multi-unit building, inspectors will look at a random selection instead of all of them, and they will inspect units with noted violations. Waynesboro residents support rental inspection programs. As a volunteer who started with Virginia Organizing late last year, nothing inspires me more than the true believers among my current and former renter neighbors in Ward A. Most of us will never be provocateurs, and some fear retaliation if they speak up. I'm here to say quite a few of us are ready to take an L or two for either the greater cause or out of spite. To paraphrase one Waynesboro woman speaking about her disabled grandmother's landlord, when you need help, they're nowhere to be found. But when it comes time to pay, they're the first to stick out their hand. You're going to hear some personal stories from more of our residents in a moment, and you'll see many of their names in Virginia Organizing's petition for starting a rental inspection program in Waynesboro. As you do, I encourage you to remember that even though we are mere links in the chain of beings, as links we still play our parts, and so serve to provide a finer metal out of which may be forged the links that follow. Despite lots of us barely getting by, the concerned residents of our city have played our parts for years to spur the city's 2018 comprehensive plan into action. If the city doesn't respond to our calls for safe and fair sanctuary in this valley, then I wonder what kind of links we'll be forging next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank Rott.
Good evening. My name is Frank Rott. I live at 220 Jocelyn Lane in Waynesboro, right off of Ivy. I have two concerns that I hope that the board and the departments within the Waynesboro will really take a look at. The first one is, with all the new home construction that is going on in the city, it is all over on Ivy, there's 3 or 4 new developments going up. You have them behind Walmart, and you have them off of DeWitt. And I'm wondering what the city is going to do with the infrastructure that's going to support all of those homes. You have the septic systems, you have the waste systems, and you also have the water that's provided by the city, and that's wells and springs. And I would hope that you folks are taking a good hard look before you issue all those building permits of what effect it's going to have on both of those issues. That's the first one. The second one, which kind of blends in with it, is the new assessment that has gone out on the housing. I think the council ought to set up a procedure where they actually explain this to us residents of how it works, where you get your numbers from, and how it shows up, and what the rate's going to be coming up in the future, and how the new construction is going to fill your coffers with real estate taxes. So it's going to grow tremendously when you look at all these homes that are going to go up. They raised my assessment went up $110,000. That's mind-boggling. The taxes have gone up over $1,000, and I know a lot of folks in this room, when they look at those bills, are going to say, how in God's name am I going to pay them? And I think the council and the city should really take a look at how that's working. And I make a recommendation to them that you split that up in 2 years. Don't give us a 30% increase 1 year. And if you keep the rate the same, that's going to be disastrous for a lot of people. So there's 2 articles that the city should really, really take a hold of. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jessica Scott.
Can you hear me still? All right.
Yes.
My name is Jessica Scott. My friends call me Nora. I moved here in December 2019 and stayed in Waynesboro for about 3 years. I am here to share my experience and why I support the rental inspection program. After I'm done speaking, I'd also like to mention that we have our petition here, and we'd like to know who we need to give it to. So my experience living in Waynesboro, I Moved here in the December of 2019. My partner and I moved into Brandon Ladd Apartments off of Rosier Avenue. In our first apartment that we had there was mold reoccurring in the bathroom. In my roommate's room, their entire window was covered in mold due to poor sealing of the windows. In the second apartment, same issue, mold in the bathroom. This time because we had an issue with someone keeping up with the fan that was in the bathroom to keep the moisture out. Every time they replaced it, their replacement was like a second-hand replacement and would break. Let's see what else. An archaic heater that was in the center of our apartment that would go out willy-nilly and or randomly, which really sucked because the apartment complex itself was poorly sealed, super hot in the summer and super cold in the winter. And the last thing that I went through living in Waynesboro, it's a little bit hard for me to talk about. In the second apartment, our upstairs neighbors I was witness to a lot of domestic violence, child abuse, and substance abuse living in the second apartment. In all of these scenarios, I went through the proper channels. I tried to contact my management. I tried to get people involved. I called the police. I called child care services, and nothing worked. Nothing worked. Eventually, I moved out in 2022. Prior to me moving out, the little girl that lived upstairs from me, she left. I don't know where she went. But suffice it to say, I think that there should be some kind of standard when we're renting somewhere. I think that management should be liable for things that happen on their property. I think that they should be liable for what happens to the people who rent there. I lived with several friends while renting in Brandon Ladd Apartments, several of whom have PTSD and other trauma-related issues, who were essentially trapped in their apartment because their apartment complex would do nothing, our landlord would do nothing, the cops would do nothing, and we just kind of had to make lemonade out of lemons. So again, my name is Jessica Scott. I think it was Ward D, actually, was the ward that I originally lived in. And if the super scary domestic violence isn't a thing that you take away from this, my experience at least, please know that through the 3 years that I did live there, maintenance, everything that I mentioned went on. Maintenance always had to YouTube things. No one seemed to be properly trained or given money to do their job. So yeah.
Thank you.
Marcia Geiger.
I'm Marcia Geiger, 701 Locust Avenue. I would like to say to Mayor Williams, thank you for denouncing Mr. Wood's remarks, first off. I've listened to all the council members tonight, and it's obvious we are going to have a very divisive council at this point because of this issue with Mr. Wood. We have all seen what's gone on in our neighboring city of Stanton with a divided council. We have way too much to take care of in this city and to move forward. This city is growing very quickly, and there's way too many things we need to be concerned about. And we don't need the time and energy to deal with this situation. And I will say to the council members as a whole, thank you for giving your honest opinions of what you're thinking of the situation. And I would say that I am going with Mr. Short's recommendation here, that Mr. Wood resign from this council. It is way too important for this city to move forward, and you will not be moving forward in the right way with him on council.
Thank you.
Craig Scott.
He's being good people. Madam Mayor.
Vice Mayor and honorable councilman, thank you for your time. Famous quote, which we've all grown up with, "He who is out without sin cast the first stone." The superficial divide and rule is irrelevant. If you're to judge someone, which I do not advise, judge by their deed. This gentleman, Vice Mayor, literally crawled out of the mines of Southwest Virginia in poverty, has sacrificed all his life, and has touched, literally, and I'm not exaggerating, thousands of lives, especially young people, helping in the community. Judge him by his deeds. I also ask the reverse. He has faced ad hominem attack and smears by our local press, we all know who they are, unfounded, officious, and falsehoods. This is libelous at the very least. I've also seen council members from previous councils act in unsavory manners themselves, and I'll leave that at that. Now, there's good things happening, and there's bad things happening. We are on the verge of a storm. We know what's going on geopolitically. World War III is on verge, whatever, maybe, God willing, it won't happen. We are also on the verge of a Great Depression that'll make the 1930s look bad. We need steady people at the tiller. We will have good governance here with market-based solutions. We're going to have soup kitchens opened up to help the poor. We're going to have lower taxes. The millage has been lowered so we can have less homeless people. Housing. HUD is unlawful and unconstitutional. Maybe our attorney, Ms. Councilman, can condemn some property so people can actually take control of their own lives and be allowed to fix some of their stuff and forced to be reimbursed by HUD or other peoples. They are trapped in a government-centric monopoly that only knows indifference and or force. I will quote one of our framers, a great man, because we have these lights on and liberty. "He who dares not to offend cannot be honest." Let's stop the pearl clutching. If he made a mistake, fine. Judge him by his deeds, if you have to judge. People are going to have warm shelter. We're going to have food for people when they are hungry. Businesses are being attracted so people have jobs in this Great Depression that is coming. This valley, maybe people remember the old show The Waltons as a kid, especially the older folks. Well, it was about a man who came to the DuPont plant and worked here and was able to feed his family over Walton's Mountain. History repeats itself. Well, we are. We're going to get good paying jobs here in the valley, and that's what they're working for. With reforms, incentivization, streamlining, good governance, market-based solutions, because we've had this government-centric monopoly ethos for the last 120 years that has been retrograde, and reactionary. Thank you. Peace and prosperity to us all. God bless.
Thank you.
Randall Wolf.
Good evening. Randall Wolf, 144 Courtney Woods Lane, Stewart's Draft, Virginia. I want to thank council for making the statements they did in the opening of this meeting. I particularly want to thank Terry Short's position. I believe that's what you need to do, and I hope that Councilman Wood considers that strongly and steps down for the sake of this community. A couple weeks ago, I thanked a couple of the council members for attending the YMCA vigil about hate. This is no different than that, than swastikas on a wall in our community. This is no different. So thank you for that. I'm also here to thank Virginia Organizing for doing tremendous work to get you data and to present a rental inspection program that is desperately needed in this city and others. And I hope that you strongly consider that. And on top of that, the topic of mold requires other inspectors. So that's not a building inspection. It's a health inspection, which takes additional resources. So figure out how to incorporate that into public safety. A lot of folks like to talk about public safety, and that means police, fire, EMTs, but how can the public be safe if they don't have homes that are safe? Thank you.
Thank you.
Evelyn Cotton.
Good evening, Mayor Williams. It's nice to see you there, and council members. I want to thank you all for your comments about Councilman Wood's comments that are essentially public. And I just want to applaud your effort, Terry, for going ahead and going through the motions to actually define for us what is tolerable conduct on the part of council members. And I just want to share that I'm really saddened that we could have gotten through the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 59 years ago, and to find ourselves today in 2023 having to spell these things out that should be something that all of us, our conscience can guide us. So thank you for making the effort. I'm sorry we have to do it. And I would urge you, Mr. Wood, as much work as you've put into your campaign and into your efforts, to also consider how effective your participation will be and make an informed choice on that. I don't know what the right answer is, but please give it consideration. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mason Pickett.
Very disappointed in you, Mayor. You don't have any idea what happened back there, but instead you scolded me.
I scolded.
Maybe sometime, ma'am.
I scolded
I
the
thought you
noise.
didn't respond to people.
Could you have your address for the record, please?
Say it again?
Your
Oh,
address.
Mason Pickett, Albemarle County. As to First Amendment rights, my father was a two-term mayor in Northern Virginia, twice interim chief of police. I remember him one time saying that your First Amendment rights do not end. You may not speak about what's on the upcoming docket or a past current docket, but you do not give up your First Amendment rights. I stick with that. Why are housing prices high? Housing prices are high because people are moving in. You need new people. It's better if you get quality people, but you need new people. Higher education is the only key.
Okay.
Add back to my time, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more disruptions? I don't know who did that.
It was me, and I will do a better job.
I'm going to ask you to step out.
He saw me a bitch. Yeah.
Partially true.
That's enough.
There are kids in here. Go on.
Time starting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hurry up.
Well, thank you. Quality people. Mr. Wood, I think it would be best if you apologize and not do it again. You have a judge here in this city that gives people second, third, and fourth chances, but you guys don't want to give a second, third, or fourth chance. You want his head now. Who are these people that are after him? They're the same people that when I hold a sign down on the corner, that on Sunday of all days, ride by in their Lexus and Mercedes and their Land Rovers in their nice little black dresses with pearls and ride by and tell me I'm number one. Whoa, on Sunday, I see 3 or 4 faces in here that do that. Now, if they'd like to raise their hand and apologize, they don't have to apologize. Just raise your hand. I bet it doesn't happen. I'm not even going to turn around and look. Well, Mr. Wood, don't do it again.
Thank you, sir.
Sharon Van Name.
Sharon Van Name, 2116 Bellevue Road. I intended tonight to speak about community and about the community that we would like to live in. That last speaker certainly gave me some thought around that direction. Unfortunately, when we talk about community and the place we would like to live in, I need to address the remarks that Mr. Wood made. They are completely unacceptable and not the way that we should be treating one another in this city. And I thank council for your condemnation of his remarks. I also would like to thank Councilman Short for his suggestion that a code of conduct be created within the next 60 days. I think that's vital. It's absolutely required that we have a statement of what is and what is not acceptable behavior. I think that the remarks themselves were despicable, but what truly bothers me is that it's such a distraction from the true work that needs to be done by this council. And that brings me to support for the rental inspection program. If we are going to have a community where people can live and raise their families and have a good quality of life, then that program is essential, because each and every one of us deserves a decent, safe place to live. A program like that is a legitimate function of city government because it involves enforcing codes. And those are things that the city it's a function. It's done best by regular planned inspections so that a tenant doesn't have to complain and worry about retaliation against them for making a complaint. Regular inspections keep everybody honest, and they are a good thing both for the tenants and for the good landlords, for the people who are doing things right and know that they will be rewarded and their places will be shown to be a good place to live. It's also good for all of us that we support the rights of every one of us to have a good place to live and to be part of a community that we can be proud of, one where we treat each other well, both in our words and in our deeds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jen Lewis.
And before we go any further, I would just like to remind everybody to be very respectful and kind when you're up here speaking. To those that are speaking, I would appreciate it if you be respectful of those that are speaking at the time.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I live on Iris Drive. I wasn't really planning on speaking tonight. I spoke last time we had a meeting about my support for Virginia Organizing's work on housing. I spoke to you about my experience being a mental health worker and how essential stable housing is for people with their mental health recovery. So I'm here tonight to reiterate my support for the work that Virginia Organizing is doing. Of course, I want to also talk about our Vice Mayor's comments, and I applaud each of your comments tonight. It makes me proud to have a mayor and council members like Lee and Short who are coming here tonight to speak out so strongly that we want our city to be inclusive. We want people to want to come here and move here and open small businesses and start their lives and their families here. I'm really disappointed, Councilman Wood, that during the council comment section where you all have an opportunity to share, you didn't speak on this issue. If you have something to say on this, we'd love to hear from you. I would love to hear an apology. The LGBTQ plus community deserves an apology. I'm sick to my stomach and I'm shaking up here because I'm so afraid of what this has done for the kids in the LGBTQ community in our community. Even if we all stand up and say this isn't what Waynesboro stands for, there's still going to be a couple of kids, and even maybe a couple adults, that still are going to feel isolated and all alone and unloved in their city. And that makes me sick to my stomach, that any kid would question their value in our city. I hope that you make the right decision and step away from council for the betterment of our city. And I hope you reflect on the damage that you've done to the LGBTQ community that live here in Waynesboro, but also nationwide. Thank you.
Dan Sullivan.
Well, council members, I'm Dan Sullivan, 215 Crompton Road. First, a public service announcement. The assessments have gone up, and this is probably going to hurt me. You do have the right to appeal those assessments, but I will say that council in Waynesboro has never used an increase in the assessments to increase the net taxes that people pay. So please be confident in them. So I'm not Nostradamus, but past is prelude. And I know that Jim Wood has been shamed by what has occurred. He has taken down all the podcasts, and in the interest of transparency, he owes it to post them again and make them available. Because they include a lot of gems, not just this one. One like, the Jews own all the banks. I know that because all my Jewish friends tell me that. And then a diatribe that shows that he may not have the competence to be on council, where he talks about the general orders and says one of them is to obey all lawful orders, which means to him that if he doesn't agree with the order, he doesn't have to obey it. And that's not what is in the general orders, and you, Mr. Lee, know that. I will tell you that I'm greatly concerned that it will reflect upon the city of Waynesboro if you continue on council, Mr. Wood. I'm also embarrassed as a veteran that you did that. And then I have a question for you, since you have that attitude about the law. And you don't have to answer me now. Somebody else can ask it, and you do have your Fifth Amendment rights. But have you ever had a firearm on public property, specifically the schools? Thank you.
Cheryl Carey.
Hello, this is Cheryl Carey, Fairway Drive, Waynesboro. I know Jim Woods. He's a good man. Did he make a comment that some people are hurt by? Has anyone on this board ever said a comment that someone else might take offense to or a thought? None of us are paragons of virtue. None of us, including me, has never had said anything wrong. And for everyone to come up here, the comment was wrong. I read in the paper, he apologized. It was taken wrong. We're not perfect. And it seems like everybody wants to just load on down on him. And it's just not right. It's like you're trying to drum up hate. Let's see what we can get rid of. It seems like there's a lot of hypocrites, and I think everyone should have some self-reflection. Self-reflection, and look into yourself and say, have I done anything, said anything wrong to anyone? None of us are pure. None of us. I have had comments sent to me, racist. Yeah, I'm a white woman, and I've had racist comments sent to me. Yeah, I am. I'm white. And I've had it. I've worked hard. I've struggled. And I've been in situations too. Just because I'm white doesn't mean I don't struggle. Just because I'm white doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And you know what? When you make a mistake, you own it, you become a better person. So we can grow from this, and we can be better. Thank you.
Abby Edwards.
Abby Edwards, 448 Raleigh Court. I guess I'm come to this a little bit differently because I speak as somebody who lived in another area for 45 years. I raised 4 children with my husband. The children grew up, they moved away, and my husband died. I am getting older now, and I knew that I need the care of a child. My kids are scattered throughout the United States, but I have one son who lives here in Waynesboro. So I decided to move here. Now, listening to the people behind me, and I know I need to direct my comments to you. Waynesboro is a fabulous community. You have location, location, location. You are at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains. You have these magnificent views. Everybody here who speaks tonight, regardless of whether they agree or disagree or whether they're coming from, one thing is very obvious. They love this community. And I know that there are people who want to come here to live. But how are they going to want to come here if they know that there is division within those that lead us? And part of the problem that I struggle with, having grown up in a conservative area, the word hate or criticism of other people, it just never appealed to me. And if this is the situation, and one of the biggest problems we have is technology, and the word spreads, throughout the country, and this is dangerous, and I'm afraid what's going to happen to Waynesboro could leave here and get passed abroad, and this is a mistake. And I direct my comments to you, Ms. Mayor. I think Mr. Wood really needs to come forth with an apology, but where I'm coming from, I really think that he needs to have the courage and the dignity to accept his mistake, and if it is not corrected, he absolutely must resign, because this is bad for the community, and it's also bad because the word gets out for the state of Virginia and the country. Thank you.
Paula Klon.
My name is Paula Klon. I live at 1150 Sherwood Avenue here in Waynesboro. I'd like to begin by saying I doubt there's anyone in this room who has not, at some time in their lives, said or done something they regret and are sorry for. I've never listened to Jim Wood's podcast, but I believe he has learned a very valuable lesson that as an elected official or any public figure, there are those who troll every form of news and social media to gain a gotcha on that individual. I believe Jim Wood when he says he regrets and is sorry for his words, and I believe in his sincerity. In this season of Lent, I am reminded of John 8:7 and Matthew 18:22. It would be good for all of us to consider and apply the powerful statements and lessons given us here. Thank all of you for putting yourselves out there and being willing to serve. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I apologize in advance if I goof this up. It's Dean or Deanne Dozier.
Hello, council members. My name is Dean Dozier. I live at 3012 Village Drive. And I have just a couple things to say regarding the situation with Jim Wood. One is, he did issue an apology. I saw it, I believe, in the Waynesboro paper, and I've seen it somewhere else too. Very heartfelt apology that he regrets what he said. And the main thing I wanted to say is, I believe this is a chance. You talk about technology putting a mistake out there where everybody sees it and it suddenly blows up and it's a huge issue. Here's a chance where I think City Council could do an amazing thing and decide to accept this apology that I saw, very well worded, heartfelt apology, and in order to bring this community together and not be divisive, to accept Mr. Wood's apology and go on from here and not spend more time talking about this issue, because he has apologized. I know Mr. Wood, he's a good man, and I'm excited that he's on council. He's actually in favor of a lot of issues that I've heard people voice, in favor of correcting a lot of issues that I've heard people voice when they come to council. So I would hardly recommend the council think of taking a different tack here than the one that you have. Thank you.
Dwight Williams.
Good evening, members of City Council, Madam Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor. Dwight Williams, 11 Jefferson Lane. First, I want to start off by saying thank you to Vice Mayor Wood for apologizing. He did apologize. He apologized to the entire community. Something he didn't have to do. Could have held the line, just didn't say anything, but he actually apologized. And I've spoken to Jim. I'm good friends with Jim. We talk a lot. And Jim meant what he said. But when it comes to the term that he used, it was done in jest. It's interesting, though, how everyone wants to come here to condemn him. When I look out in the audience, I'm here about 90% of the city council meetings. There's about 5 people out here that show up to about all of them. Everybody else behind me show up just for this one thing. For the most part, they're here for fireworks. They're here to condemn. They're not here to be not divisive. You talked about division, Councilman Lee. Well, let me talk about division too. We've got people that showed up here specifically to divide. They were incited to come out. They were not here to support City Council or support Councilman Wood. They are here to divide. There are folks in this audience who I've also can point out, I won't put their names out because there's some people behind me that are probably laughing at me right now, that's fine, who personally attacked Vice Mayor Wood online, defamed his name, and he has yet to return fire on them. So the point of the matter is that he's apologized. It's time for us to move on. We want to be less divisive. Let's end this right now. Let's talk about what is actually important for Waynesboro. We have a whole council chamber of people here tonight. We usually have like 5. There's like, what, 90? Let's talk about what actually matters here. Let's talk about a fire station on the west side. Let's talk about the housing that people brought up earlier today. Let's talk about giving more money to our sheriff, Chris Johnson, so he can buy more uniforms and get more deputies for the courthouse. That's the important stuff. What was said was nothing. Let's talk about the fact that we've got people in Ohio that right now are having trouble with the whole train crash. What that happened here in Waynesboro? Do you think that our president and the Secretary of Transportation would have actually come down here at a reasonable amount of time? Because they didn't there. So let's talk about what's important to Waynesboro. Those are the important issues. The more we talk about what was said, we're just being further divisive. We don't need to be that way. For whoever incited everyone to come out here to speak against Vice Mayor Wood, shame on you. Shame on you, because you are part of the problem of division. Let's come together as a community. Apology was made. Let's move forward. We can go forward stronger together as a community. Vice Mayor Wood, I encourage you to hold your ground and stay in your position. You are a fantastic individual. You are a friend of mine. I think you're doing a fantastic job on City Council. And I would say, do not resign. Hold the line. Thank you.
Jess Hancock.
I'm Jess Hancock, 608 Sumter Road in Waynesboro. And I know Jim. I don't know him well. I think what he did was not the best thing. He hopefully is going to learn from this and go forward and do a good job for Waynesboro. I've been sitting in the back because I got here a little bit late. And I've seen the group of people that are here up in front of me. And I've seen a lot of people smiling, shaking their heads, mumbling, and when somebody mentioned some scripture, they chuckled. These people really aren't interested in whether or not Jim serves Waynesboro or not. And as I think has been pretty obvious, there are a lot of people here prosecuting as opposed to trying to solve a problem. I think Jim has some qualities that will serve Waynesboro well. And if he intends on being more in politics, I'm sure he's learned a valuable lesson with all the bad feedback that has come upon him. I have not personally heard Jim say anything. I have read of his apology, at least, which was a step in the right direction. And so, Jim, I don't know if it would be proper to hear anything from you tonight to this group, but I would welcome that. And I hope council members who voted to eject Jim will give it a second thought. What's important is what council does in the years to come. Don't throw away a good guy who's made a mistake. Haven't we all? Thank you.
Thank you.
Rob Orlando.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Rob Orlando, Maple Avenue. I'll be brief because I think we've talked quite a bit about this tonight, but I want to echo and support Councilman Short's recommendation that we develop a code of conduct for the council ASAP. I think that a lot of this could have been alleviated if we had a process that was codified that we could, as citizens, respond to and understand what the ramifications could be if a council member, whether you're Democrat, Republican, whatever you feel, missteps and makes a mistake. So thank you, Councilman Short, for making that recommendation. I support it 100%.
Thank you.
Ellen O'Hanlon. Tiffany Sensible.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Tiffany Sensible, Woodrow Avenue. I wasn't planning on speaking, so my comments will be short and sweet. I too wanted to say that I did read Jim's apology. It sounds like maybe some might want to go and look that up and read it. I don't care what Google says when I do a search for Jim Wood's name. What I do care about is what Jim can do for our city. I care about Jim's education, his business experience, his knowledge of our history and our legal system, his time in the service, and his love for Waynesboro. All of these things are what makes Jim a good leader. And it's unfortunate that some are placing more weight on this comment than his experience and knowledge and abilities to be a strong leader. It is not in the city's best interest for Jim to relinquish his title. My husband and I have gotten to know Jim pretty well over the last few years. We have been big supporters, and that has not changed. Thank you.
Danny Ledford.
Danny Ledford, Wayne Avenue. I wasn't sure if I was going to speak, but sitting in the back and watching some of the behaviors of people, especially when people start preaching tolerance and inclusion and acceptance, and then they do anything but, it just reeks of hypocrisy. Whether you want to accept Jim Wood's apology or not, the fact is it was an apology. And it's not for me or anyone else to make you accept it. It's something that he did. I know Jim personally. He's a great man. He's a close friend of mine. He's a veteran. He went to fight for this country, just like many of you in this room. And I think at some point, after someone apologizes, you move on, you move forward. So that's what I'm going to say about that. The housing, we would all love for everyone to have affordable housing. I can't imagine a single person in this room that would say otherwise. But when you have an influx from Charlottesville coming over, because the prices are lower here already, continue to ramp up. And if anyone in this room thinks that the cost of housing is going to go down or stay static over the next 5 years, I can assure you that it will not. It's going to happen because we continue to build. It continues to pull people over from Charlottesville. That will continue to increase. One last thing, and I will let this go. I know this has been addressed, Tent City. There was an article that was discussed, and people were critical of the property owner. Let that sink in. They were critical of the property owner for not wanting these people on his property. They were breaking into his businesses. They were threatening people. That's why they were removed. So before we start throwing stones at a property owner, those that are in favor or criticizing that property owner, if you, as council, will allow me, I will donate some money to a bus. And those people that are complaining about them being moved, just let us know how many you want in your yard, and they'll be more than happy to come there and they can squat there. But I highly doubt that anybody would stand up and raise their hand and say, I'll take 2, take 1, take 3. So before they attack you guys on it, make sure that they're paying attention to what they're doing and their actions. Thank you.
Jeremy Sloat.
Good evening, council. Jeremy Sloat, 920 Dogwood Circle. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 4 children. I've lived in Waynesboro for 17 plus years, worked in Waynesboro for the same period of time at the same place. Over this past year and a half, I've gotten to know members of the council and running for city council. Kenny Lee won Ward C, and in meeting with members of the community that did know Kenny and his family, I was confident that whichever way the election turned out, we'd be in good hands. I knew also in Jim's ward that we would be in good hands, whatever the outcome would have been. Jim is a good person. He helped me out. As far as I know of Jim, that comment did not come from a place of hate. It was flippant. It was thoughtless. It was careless. But I don't for a second believe that he has that hate in his heart. I want my kids to be raised in a community that doesn't have hate. All of us want that. And I think we are in a good place as far as Waynesboro goes. There are incidences of things happening, but the fact that those are headlines in our community say that we take them serious and that they don't fall through their cracks. I grew up in Baltimore City. That stuff doesn't make headlines. Okay? We do what we can to make our community better for our kids. So Jim, I appreciate the apology you put out in the paper. Council, I appreciate your comments on it for taking a stand and speaking out. But I would urge Jim, and I trust that he will make the decision that he feels is best for Waynesboro. And I trust him to do that, just like I trust each and every one of you to do that. And I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I would like to say one thing. I started in Hopeman Parkway Village Apartments, and my sister lived in Brandon Ladd Apartments. They are atrocious. Sorry. Thank you.
That's it.
That's it? Okay. All right, that ends the citizen comment period. Item 14 is to move into a closed meeting, and do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that this meeting be recessed and that the City Council of Waynesboro immediately reconvene in a closed meeting per Code of Virginia 2.2-3711, paragraph 3, to discuss or consider the acquisition of real property for public purpose or of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of a public body, specifically acquisition of real property for city offices.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wood. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any discussion? Okay, this requires a roll call vote. Ms. Bortle?
Mayor Williams?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Councilman Short?
Aye.
Councilman Lee?
Aye.
We're in closed session.
I'll talk to you afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion to return to open meeting to certify the closed meeting?
Madam Mayor, just right now.
Yep.
So her get the door closed.
Julia sprinting over there.
I know. Madam Mayor, I move to adopt the following resolution. Whereas the City Council of Waynesboro has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this City Council that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of Waynesboro hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, not only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and two, only such business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the City Council of Waynesboro. Excuse me.
Okay, thank you for that motion. Do I have a second?
No second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Any discussion? Ms. Bortle, this requires a roll call vote.
Vice Mayor Williams?
Aye.
I'm sorry. Mayor Williams?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Wood?
Aye.
Councilman Short?
Aye.
Councilman Lee?
Aye.
And the final item is there a motion to adjourn?
I would like to make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.